Yeah.
Anyway.
Anyway, moving on from Denmark into Norway, since we're talking about it,
Okay.
they have the world's first zero emission construction site that's been used to convert a busy street into a pedestrian zone. The equipment being used to break up and lift slabs of asphalt were so quiet that nearby cafes and restaurants kept their front doors open. And this is just one out of many projects spanning every government department over the past 6 years that Norway has undertaken to reduce greenhouse emissions. The country is aiming for Oslo to reduce its emissions by 95% from its 2009 levels by 2030, which is pretty awesome. Oslo's approach is heavy on incentives. I'm curious what you think about some of these. And they include charging non-electric vehicles more for parking and tolls, and zero emission machinery will be mandatory for city contracts. And after several years of using grants to encourage people to replace their oil furnaces, the city banned them in 2020. It's important to know that the people, like I said, have wanted this. They embrace it. They did not fight it. And the Green Party has nearly doubled its representation on the city council. So while Oslo might be an outlier, several cities around the world are joining the climate budgeting pledge from nearly every continent, even Los Angeles, although who knows how they're counting it, given the RECs that we just talked about. But Montreal, for instance, is currently planning to be carbon neutral by 2050.
I mean, look,
So,
it sounds like it wasn't just punitive. Okay, that's the difference. So what you said, what I think about the incentivization, the issue with America, especially when we enact our legislation, is that if we ever do go punitive, it's usually not equal. There is someone who shares more of that burden than others based on where they are social economically, as far as their voting block and how much money they're able to contribute to those politicians. So that imbalance already puts a bad taste in most people's mouths because that could be used in partisan politics for one side or the other. Okay. Uh, Without the support, again, because it's not done equitably, the people who have to share more of the burden are often left in the dark because they're not being supported adequately by the government. It sounds like what happened here is not only did they had punitive measures that were going to be enacted at a date for anyone who did not roll over, but they had an ample period where it seems like they were supporting all these new initiatives with either additional incentives or incentives to make it easier for people to want to transfer over because they weren't going to bear a hardship as a result of transferring over. In America, we leave the hardship bearing to the individual.
and
We
I think
say,
we, with ATs, right? Like we outlawed like the Freon. You can't get Freon anymore, but I don't remember receiving any grant to convert from a Freon AC to whatever it is they have now.
yeah,
Um,
I don't remember if there was a buyback program or anything like that. I mean, I could use my own town as the example. I think I talked about that. I can't remember if I talked about it on podcast, but when we switched over by banning the oil, the gas powered blowers and forcing all the businesses to replace them with electric, but there was no compensation. It was just punitive. It's just straight out punitive. Either you can't do business in this town if you don't switch over, and that's it by this date. And a lot of them just said, all right, so we won't do business in this town. And they just left. And then people just can't get their landscaping. And the people who did stay were able to raise prices because there's no competition. And the thing is, it takes them even longer because it's the mode of which they have to now clean up the leaves and whatever is weaker. So it just takes longer. Again, that's just punitive legislation without any buffer, without a fluffer, if you will, is what's required when you enact legislation. You need a fluffer. You can't just have people going out there all willy-nilly and expecting them to perform. You gotta ease them into it. Most people need a fluffer. It sounds like fluffers are in abundance in Scandinavia and are far between in these United of States. So yeah, so what do you expect? This is why they like their government, and we sit here hemming and hawing and complaining all day long because government doesn't do anything. It doesn't do it right.
all right, well said. I got one more
All right,
thing,
you got one more. Go.
one more part of this. Now that we're all warmed up, now that we're all educated and aware and
Now that
on
you're all
point
fluffed,
and sensitive, I'm not going to use that word,
now
but
that you're adequately fluffed, you ready for this? Are you ready, listener? All right, let's go.